Welcome to the lock-in, part 4. Dara, we made it to episode 4. Congratulations.
Thanks very much, David. Before you get started, there's just something. I know you're suffering in lockdown at the moment, and it's definitely been at least 6 months. So there's something I want to show you.
Ah, yes. There it is.
Wait, what do I have here? What
Shush,
do I have?
I haven't introduced you yet. Shush.
Wait, where's yours, David?
Do you have one, David?
Well, on that note. No, I have nothing. Thanks, guys. Did you synchronize that troll of me? I'm not even going to bother. Look, there's Jen Shahade. She decided to show up this week. So I had this nice thing written down about you, but I'm just not going to
Well, say it now anyway.
No, I'm done. The grid rivalry with us has become sort of a bit worryingly nasty of late. Jen, what's going on?
Well, you know, we got our podcast wars. There's the poker grid and the chip race.
The only award-winning podcast that I know of.
And you know, we took your trophy basically. Well, we've got the
I never got one to be
title.
Yeah,
of the best podcast.
I took his trophy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're the best podcast in the world right now.
That's it.
So you can ask me for tips. I'm open.
Well, that's why we have you here. No, it's true actually. What Dara said there at the start, though, is true. The deal we have is once every 6 months, he has to either send me a photograph of it or show it to me on video. That's all I get.
Yeah.
It's
helping me a lot in lockdown because anytime I feel bad about the whole situation, I just look at it and I think about how much pleasure it gives me that you will never ever hold it in your hands.
It's true. This is my punishment for never bringing my poker trophies home with me, Jen.
You just have to win again, and then maybe you could get the second one.
Yeah, I think
you won't give it to me.
I won't give it to him. No, not a chance.
Maybe you could win Breakout Player of the Year instead.
Yeah. On that note, here's my gin and tonic because people were a bit pissed off that we called our show The Lock-In and neither of us were drinking, so I thought I'd at least make myself a very watered down gin and tonic there.
Are we allowed to drink on stream? I thought that was against corporate policy.
Well, very, very watered down, as I said.
Does not look like a gin and tonic at all.
It doesn't look like a gin and tonic. It literally looks like, I don't even know what it looks like.
What the fuck is that like?
It looks like a tropical drink of some kind with like 3 different types of juices and 2 different types of liquor.
Juniper-y. Yum.
Yeah.
Talking about your show, The Grid, Jen, the one thing that always impressed, I think, both of us from the very start was you decided on a very strong concept. So I know that's something that with your art background would be something that would be always in your mind anyway. You'd be percolating an interesting idea, but it's really stood to you because I think one of the things that podcasts do suffer from over time is how without a sort of a strong central concept, they lose their way or they become a victim to maybe running out of the host's stories or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult. It's interesting because I think it creates this overarching intrigue as there's like this mystery of whether I will ever actually complete it or not. So that's a good thing. The bad thing is if somebody has like a great story with Ace Jack offsuit, well, hey, Chris Kruk already talked about it. Or aces, Jamie Kurtzitter took those right out of the gate. Of course, Jamie took aces, right?
Selfish bitch.
There we go.
But that said, I feel like there are pros and cons, and I just got to be creative as some of the better hands get clicked off. Make sure I'm figuring out ways so that people still have really good stories to tell.
And when you look at the other podcasts that are out there, obviously it's very hard to imagine anyone eclipsing either yours or our show as 2020 winners, but who do you look at and kind of think, well, that's an interesting idea or that's got some legs or some potential to maybe, grow?
Well, I like a lot of the poker podcasts. I mean, there's so many good ones right now. It seems like I'm really happy I won in 2019 because it seems like it's getting more and more heated with so many people coming up with these great ideas. And not only just that I won an award, which is of course great because it gets more people to know about the grid and I get to lord it over you guys, but it's also just I think that the podcasts that are coming out like right now or recently, it's even harder from a marketing point of view because there's so much going on and so much competition for those listeners and those subscribers. Whereas if you've been around for a while, you know, you already have them, right? So it's not that it's a bad time to start a podcast. It's just you actually have to have a marketing strategy, right? Which is tough because when you're a podcaster, you're also doing everything by yourself, right? The production, the editing. You might be able to hire some of it out, but ultimately it's a lot of work as is. And I think maybe previously the marketing was a little bit more just slap some links here and there and you're good to go, right? But your question was about podcasts that I like besides yours and ours. Ours meaning me and my husband, Daniel. I really like a lot of them. I love Olivier's podcast, even though he's only have like 5 episodes. I think he does a great job. And I really like the Kara Scott, our friend Kara Scott's new podcast, The Heart of Poker, which I think there's some similarities with that in mine, and that it's this very, very, I don't want to say rigid, but it's this very specific structure that she asks people these deep psychological questions that have nothing to do with poker, with the idea that you're going to get another side of people. And even though in the grid, we're talking exactly about poker, I think from a structural point of view, it also has that like hyper specificity, which you could call a gimmick or you could call a really fun time.
Yeah, expanding on what Jen said there, Dara, the one thing I suppose we thought initially when we came out with our podcast 5 years ago was that we have our Twitter reach and maybe we have the company who are behind us in the first year. They might have a little bit of power to get us out there, but we were sort of relying on our existing audience and then building on it. How do you feel like, touching on what Jen said there about how a new podcast has to sort of have a marketing strategy in place almost from the word go, just to even have any chance?
Yeah, I think the first year we probably didn't really put too much thought into it because, well, for a start, it was just we were commissioned to do 6 or 7 shows, whatever it was, and it was kind of the company behind us. They owned it, so, and there was no online sponsor at that point. So it was also focused solely on Irish poker. I mean, we did a UK episode too, which actually did the worst of all the episodes we put out first year. So that kind of just reinforces into the view that we were better off sticking to Irish poker. When it came back with Unibet, the focus changed completely in that we had to sort of now not just reach Ireland. In fact, Ireland wasn't even useful at the time because Unibet weren't licensed in Ireland at that time. So I think we really struggled in the first year, first season back, in terms of knowing what our audience was or would be. Even booking guests was really difficult. I mean, you said to me recently that when you asked Charlie Carroll, he asked immediately, well, who were your last 3 guests? We definitely had difficulties in the beginning when we asked people and they looked at the guests and it was, you know, people known to us maybe, but not people known to them, and that made them less keen to come on. I think we got very, very savvy about marketing. We basically used every angle we could. You know, we leaned on Jake Cody through our friendship with him to sort of be our first big name guest. Then we used him as a springboard to get other people like Pads, and we kind of realized that was our audience, the online grinder audience. That they were the people who resonated with our audience. Obviously, Jennifer Tilly was a huge breakthrough for us as well.
I listened to that episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's so great.
She was absolutely wonderful. I mean, she went out of her way to give us that. She actually interrupted her lunch hour in a busy day of filming interviews for her latest movie. So, and Jen also helped us get other American guests, which basically expanded the reach as well. Initially, we were definitely UK, I would say UK and Ireland focused, but then it spread over time. And as we realized our market was getting bigger and bigger, and our reach was getting bigger and bigger, we became more tactical. So now, you know, if you do look at our guest list, there tends to be a pattern. There's a certain amount of American-facing guests. There's a certain amount of Europeans. There's a certain amount of non-English speakers. There's a balance between male and female. There's a balance between online and live. And David, you in particular do an amazing job just spamming the shit out of every Facebook forum that hasn't banned you yet.
Well, it's funny you say that because I was talking to Joe Ingram recently and he complimented us on sort of the same thing, which is that, well, you guys really do a good marketing push. And I sort of explained to him that our policy from very early on, which is something Dara always talked about, was I guess we call it like the Bowie rule or something like that, which was that David Bowie used to have this attitude of, well, when I'm in the studio and I'm creating a piece of art, okay, I might let the occasional influence in, but basically I want to be an artist and I want to be kind of singular in my vision, and I want to make something that I believe in and really want to make. And then the day the thing is locked off, I become a prostitute and I just pour the bollocks out of whatever I've made and try and make it as big a success as possible and get as many people to listen to it. And I suppose when we're curating the show, we kind of make the show we want to hear for the most part. Obviously with a little bit of an ear on maybe what could be popular or what could be topical, but I think we pretty much want to make a show that's got a bit of variety to it that sort of would make us want to listen to it. And then once we've done that, we don't really care about who we annoy or spam or, threaten or browbeat or, whatever we've done over the years.
Yeah,
Would you stoop so low to pretend that you don't like one of your friends in order to ratchet up excitement for your own podcast?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, just
fake fights. Frenemies.
Friends. Switching it up, you just played a fantastic charity tournament. I have to give a lot of credit to PokerStars on this one. They put on a huge event where I think money was being given out to all sorts of different charities, whoever I think the individuals chose. Maybe 100K for first, but it was £1 million total given away. And you battled through quite a big field of some other pros, but a lot of celebrities to get, third for 40K, 50K?
Exactly, yeah. So that was it was so much fun. I mean, I've always loved playing charity tournaments in general because usually...
Some of your best results, Jen, let's be honest.
I know. I really do. In fact, back when I made videos for Run It Once, I actually made a video on charity tournaments. On crushing charity tournaments. It was like obviously tongue in cheek, but I think I did like do some math. I can't remember, but because usually there's in charity tournaments, there's like some really bizarre reentry structure where you like enter for like $300 and then there are unlimited reentries for like $100. So like you actually are trying to get it in with any two if you have your starting stack, if you're trying to do well and donate as much money for a charity and be the winner, right? So I was trying to actually break that down. But because, there used to be tournaments like that, I think online as well, where like the re-entry was like a very small percentage of the actual entry, but you got a lot of chips for it. So there wasn't like zero practical value. Of course, in this one, because of regulations, it was all play money. So we all just played on the play money site. And that was probably really hard for a lot of the celebrities just to get used to the client. I gave a poker lesson actually to Gabriel Mack, the star character in the TV show Suits. Mm-hmm. And most of our lesson was me trying to explain to him how to use the bet slider. I mean, if you've never done that before and seeing what the different bet sizes are and like avoiding just min betting all the time, which is of course something that a lot of people who've never played online poker before will just like click the min bet too often or min raise. So just trying to explain that is probably the most overwhelming thing. And actually Gabriel did really well in the tournament. So I was very proud of my teaching abilities.
And I remember seeing, was it Matt Affleck who was sort of chatting you up with 4 or 5 left?
Casey Affleck.
Casey Affleck, sorry.
Yeah. And he apparently he liked chat.
The actual star as opposed to the poker player.
Poker player, yeah.
I knew it wasn't Ben.
Casey Casey was talking about how he liked chess. So, obviously there's so much overlap between chess and poker. And then it was pretty cool that the guy from Billions Wags ended up winning it all. That was really, really fun to see because I'm a big fan of that character.
And Breaking Bad.
What's that?
I'm Breaking Bad.
Oh, right. Yeah, wait. Who was he on Breaking Bad? Sorry.
Dale. The other chemist that Jesse kills.
Oh God,
that-
yeah. I mean, it's been so long since I've watched Breaking Bad. I actually never put that together. I should have though. But his personality, as you can see after he won it, was also just really great. He reminded me, it just kind of, it seems like being able to play like the big party guy who's also really brilliant. I wouldn't be surprised if his real life personality is somewhat similar to that based on like the post game interview.
Absolutely. Dara, I want to ask you a question, actually. During the week, there's been a lot of tweeting, actually. It's almost like we've reached a tipping point with the sort of lockdown online poker situation where maybe a lot of the initial deposits that maybe came from live players who thought, well, I have to play online now, they probably played kind of big. Maybe a lot of them got burnt and aren't enjoying it so much.
Yeah.
And I did a tweet about a few tips that people might avail of, but probably the best tweet that went out there was from our good pal Louise Butler.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get your take on that, Dara. She said, drop stakes drastically, don't late reg PKOs, something you should obviously be able to help us out about. Avoid unlimited re-entry games, play some small fields and learn how to multi-table. What was your reaction when you saw Louise post that?
Yeah, I thought it was a brilliant post. I think she nailed the major points. Like I'm friends with a lot of recreational players. I coach some as well, but they tended to be fairly hardened online players. Of greater interest right now are the recreational players I know who never really played online and are suddenly playing online, or even some live pros as well. And it's just interesting to see how much they struggle with the whole thing. They seem to struggle far more on the mental side and with tilt in general than online poker players do. I feel that's kind of down to like we're just used to it at this stage and we don't get too emotionally involved. But for them, it still kind of feels like a live tournament in a sense. So they get really upset when they bust, particularly if it's a bad beat, and that upsets them for a long time. Also, the multi-tabling thing is interesting because I mean that's something that not everybody can do. And if you are just one tabling, then it feels far more like the live experience where all of your emotional investment is in that one table. And if you take a bad beat after 6 hours, it kind of feels as shitty as it does live. Whereas, if you're 20 tabling like David is, then you just barely even notice if one of the tables disappears from your screen. So yeah, I thought it was a very good tweet. I do think that ultimately the players who stick around will either have to sort of like toughen up and just accept the online paradigm, and that it's different online. Because if they're seeing it as purely as a substitute for live poker, it's never going to be that, I don't think. No matter how they do it, it's going to, I think it's going to cause them distress. It's also, somebody made a point on the thread, it's far more obvious online that you're a losing player because, your money just disappears gradually. Whereas live players can often sort of have this self-delusion that they believe they're winning. There was a famous study, I guess you could call it, 20 years ago where a guy was playing in a home game and he kept meticulous records of how everybody did. And he worked out that there was one big winner in the game, I think 2 moderate winners, of which he was one, 2 moderate losers and 5 big losers. But the interesting thing was he asked everybody at the end of the year how they thought they were doing. And everybody except the big winning player overestimated how well they were doing. The moderate winner thought he was winning a lot. The moderate losers thought they were actually winning. And the big losers thought they were losing, but not that much. And I think that's true in live poker in general, particularly with tournaments being so spaced out. People can, unless they keep actual records, it's not obvious to them how they're actually doing.
Right, and you can also always just focus on the unlucky spots where you feel like it's not at all your fault that you busted that tournament. So that can obviously contribute to the delusion as well. But I think, I started streaming after this lockdown, and it was something I resisted for quite a long time. But I'm happy that I tried it because, and I talked to David a little bit about this too. On my podcasts, both of them actually, but in particular the Poker Grade, I often interview people who stream full-time or are passionate about streaming. And I just feel like now in retrospect, like my questions about it were a bit naive, and from this experience of trying streaming myself, I'll always be better at interviewing people who are professional streamers or esports professionals. Also with my commentary work, I feel really much more empowered to understand that, incredibly growing world. So that said, in terms of live players who want the social aspect, streaming does really bring that in, where you can play poker and then on the side, chat with new and old friends. So that's something to keep in mind. I personally have trouble sometimes playing too many tables or playing like online blitz chess that's too fast because it hurts my eyes after a while. I remember when I was pregnant, I was playing like a lot of 1-minute games just to relieve stress. And like I was fine, but like my eyes were playing tricks on me. So I think that can be one of the tricky things especially for players who aren't like super young, How do you guys ever have any issues with that with your eyes?
Yeah, I do for sure. Not so much recently because I think maybe it's like everything else that your body just adapts and gets trained to it. But certainly, and the other thing is I don't do the same kind of, or at least until lockdown, I didn't do the same kind of online volume that I had done at the start of my career. But there were periods where towards the ends of long sessions where my vision would get blurry and have a sort of throbbing, and the only thing I could really do was just during the 5-minute break lie down and give my eyes a rest, and that seemed to help. But yeah, it's an issue. Actually, since I came back from lockdown too, I haven't had problems with the eyes, but I have noticed some other things. I have sort of well into a session, my wrist tends to get sore, sort of a repetitive strain injury. Again, I think it's just because I'm playing almost every day now, and I'm doing much longer sessions than I have in recent years. So those sort of issues are coming back.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy for me also that like in this crazy time where so many people are losing their jobs and it's so sad, I actually am probably working more than almost ever, especially when it comes to like sitting at my desk and working because there's nothing else to do. So a lot of my normal releases like going to group fitness classes are off the table, obviously. So we're hanging out with friends in the park, going on play dates with my son, going to the playground with my son. All that being off the table, it's actually just causing me to like sit in my chair more. So it's difficult. And I've noticed like some injuries based on that. But hey, I mean, it's also very interesting stuff that I'm doing now. And I feel blessed that we're in worlds like podcasting, poker, and in my case, chess that are actually booming partly because of this. And it doesn't mean that I'm happy that any of this happened. God forbid, no, all the death and sadness, but it does make it a little easier to distract yourself when work is so booming, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the podcasting thing is interesting because we didn't really know what the impact would be early on, because one of the things we realized about our listeners is they're creatures of habit. So, there are people who always listen to us on a Monday, people who listen to us on a Tuesday, and everybody's habits seem to be thrown out of kilter by the lockdown, obviously. So we found when we put our first show back that the numbers were just all over the place because people's habits had obviously changed. But the overall numbers have gone up. And I think that's true across the whole podcasting thing. Podcasts in particular are one of the things which people seem to be willing to consume more. Hopefully that will continue. Speaking of chess, I'm very intrigued by the painting behind you. That looks like a puzzle that was on Nate Silver's site recently with the knight missing.
Oh yeah, well what happened is actually my toddler came into this room and he took the knight and
yeah. I don't know if you know that puzzle.
He's a little boy now. He's 3.5, but yeah.
I don't know if you know that puzzle because basically the knight is missing and he's on the queen square. He's on the black queen square, and you're told he got there in 10 moves and whatever, and you have to work it out how he got there.
Oh, cool! I gotta look that up. Nate.
Yeah, it's really cool because I spent about 3 minutes messing around, going like, there's no path between those two things, and then I had a sort of a brainwave. Where I realized, wait a minute, the knight always has to move to a square of the opposite color.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So therefore, if it's 10 moves, he must have started on a black square, not a white square. So therefore, it must be the other knight, and the two knights must have changed position in the meantime. So I was really proud of having solved this. I was so proud that I actually typed up and I was telling you I solved this, and then I realized how sad this was that I was sending both. I was like all the people who barely know how to play poker writing to me to tell me about this hand they won. So I didn't actually send it in the end.
Oh, but now you get to tell me. No, I'm going to look that up. Nate Silver was in that charity tournament the other day as well, by the way.
Yeah, they have a puzzle section, and it's like from a month ago or so. They do a puzzle and you have to work it out. But yeah, it was a cool one because, like, obviously the eureka moment is when you realize that it's not the knight which is missing from its square; it's the other knight which still appears to be on its starting square that must have made the journey.
Yeah, that's a cool thing about chess problems and puzzles, that eureka moment, as you mentioned, where you get this kind of like feeling of euphoria or sliver of joy that you found. Basically, it's like unlocking. They call it a key in a way. Yeah. That is one term for it, a key, that you're kind of like unlocking something. It's a sense of great relief, because having a puzzle in front of you and not being able to figure out what the right move, it's frustration. So you're basically simulating frustration in order to relieve it. Which, yeah, I mean, and in chess, it also has this like aesthetic component to it as well. Oh, I love chess puzzles and problems. That's like one of my favorite parts of the game. Probably what pushed me into it. Even as a kid, I have this artistic side to me. So I think the fact that chess has this art side, it's not just pure competition and, war, is a good way to like draw people in of a certain type. And then, of course, once you're hooked, then you want to win. But it's not necessarily the feeling of victory isn't what got you hooked in the first place.
It's really interesting. There is one other tweeter this week I wanted to get both of your views on. I guess it's in the news right now. Patrick Leonard, who is obviously quite a vocal person, both on Twitter and when he gets on a podcast, said, "In my opinion, a poker union has to be established as soon as possible. There needs to be pros from Stars Party, ACR, GG, and all the other major sites, and it needs to be agreed what we as ambassadors believe will protect our game." I would also like to point out that later down that thread, he pointed out what great ambassadors both Dara and I were. Actually, we were the only named ambassador. I didn't see your name anywhere, Jen, unfortunately. I'm sure he meant to put it there, but he
Hey, I saw him tweet the other day that the poker grid is absolutely brilliant. So just saying.
Did he? I didn't see that tweet either. Anyway, more importantly, I wanted to get your take, maybe Jen go first, on that notion of a union. I think in the past, efforts to create any kind of unionization has always fallen flat. Poker players do tend to be sole operators in so many respects, and it doesn't kind of work. But maybe this is something a select group of people who do have maybe a role to play in each company could sort of sit down together. I don't know. It's a fascinating thread, and I recommend it to anybody out there. They should go read it. We're actually going to try and get Pads on the show soon to talk more about it. But I did want to get your takes on it initially anyway.
It's funny. I actually didn't see that. I feel like I saw parts of that thread where he was talking about his stable maybe and how in the current games. But Pads and his Twitter, sometimes it's tricky because he's so witty and tongue-in-cheek sometimes. Sometimes I'm not. I feel like I'm going to be really relieved to see him on your show so that he can expand more on what he means. Because on Twitter, I sometimes find it difficult to interpret the things that he's saying, especially when he talks about strategy. Like a lot of the times I don't know whether he's being serious or not. And I have to like ask somebody, is this a joke or not? I don't know if Dara can, it looks like he's nodding. And
yeah, that's a fantastic non-answer from Jen there. Dara, do you have anything real to say?
Pads is he's definitely, he's got that sort of wry Northern English sense of humor where you can't always take everything he says seriously, particularly on the strategy side. I think in this case, he's being very serious and heartfelt. I think it falls under the category of like really good idea in theory, almost impossible to implement in practice. I've actually been involved in sort of some underground attempts to do this type of thing in the past where different ambassadors from different sites have come together and talked about protecting the recreational player pool, making online poker better. Sorry, deep state.
Poker deep state.
But it always falls apart because ultimately the sites are kind of at odds with each other, and it's very, very difficult to get them all to agree on anything. And it's also tends to be regarded with suspicion. If a particular suggestion is made, where it comes from it seems to be more important than the actual suggestion itself. It's like, well, that guy's a party ambassador, and we're poker stars, so why why would we take on board what he has to say? So personally, I've always found that it's run aground in the past. I mean, I think it could possibly still work. And in fact, maybe making it public in some way would be better. If you have a public discourse, then other people can also get involved and give their opinion. So it's not just a sort of a group of self-selected people who think they can somehow talk for the entire online poker industry. But yeah, I just think I wouldn't be very optimistic about the possibility of it being too effective, because I think at the end of the day, the sites call the shots, and the biggest sites in particular.
Yeah, I guess the big concern though is that we're going to slay the golden goose, or whatever that phrase is. That there is a sense maybe that the sites, almost encouraged by the lockdown boom, if you want to call it that, are now overdoing it, and they're trying to sort of get all the money too fast and not properly managing their ecosystems. And maybe overall that's going to have a damaging effect, even if it seems right now like it's never been better.
Well, I mean, a lot of this comes down to how the sites even view the industry. I mean, there's been a very popular view among online players, and it's even been expressed by some former Stars employees, for example, that the Stars attitude changed a few years ago to sort of, well, online poker is doomed to die. So therefore, all we can do is make as much money from it as possible in the long term, rather than thinking about the long-term sustainability. So, I mean, the sites seem to have been caught on the hop by the whole boom that came from the lockdown, and they have sort of scrambled around and done these series and made an attempt. But some of the points that Pads raised, like just how pernicious re-entries are, for example, that's a particularly good one. I mean, re-entries absolutely screw everyone, but they particularly screw the recreational players. That's something that Stars used to know. I mean, when you know, David, that when Stars and Full Tilt came together, Full Tilt at the time had multi-entries, as they call them, essentially re-entries, and Stars were completely against the idea, because the people in Stars at the time understood what the long-term effect on the ecosystem would be.
Yeah.
But now more and more of the sites are accepting not just re-entry, but unlimited re-entry or multiple re-entries. I think Party used to be the worst offenders on that, and actually they've come around on the issue now. Presumably, Pads has done some good work there behind the scenes. But yeah, I mean, I think even if sort of a union doesn't come out of this, the fact that Pads is raising these things as issues, and Louise obviously raised unlimited re-entries as an issue in her tweet as well, means that at least there is a sort of education going on. It's something we've talked about in the past on the chip race, you know, just why re-entry is such a bad idea, but I don't think it's something which has necessarily got across to a lot of players. I still know a lot of recreational players who don't see what the problem with them is, and even pros who think that they in some way favor them, which is obviously nonsense as well.
And Jen, would you, from the inside of Stars, maybe, I know obviously you're not backroom as such, but would you get a sense of their game plan in terms of how much they love re-entry right now, or is that a plan, or would they look at something like this? Like I saw GG actually responded to Pads saying, that's really interesting, we value your opinion on these things and we will look into it. Do you think it's the kind of thing that, you know, he could actually create a discourse internally there?
Well, I think that, I can't really speak to that, especially to the Around the World site, but I do know that when the PA Scoop came to PA, I was really happy that the entry fees seemed to be a little bit lower than in previous series that I saw, like NG Scoop and the previous PA series. So they were definitely aware that with COVID-19, like encouraging responsible gaming is more important than ever, just with people's careers and bankrolls being more uncertain, and also just having more time to play, making it even more important to, you know, not mess up for the players, right? Because like if you only get to play once a week or twice a week and you play a little bit over what you're supposed to play, that's potentially not as damaging as now being home so often. So I was impressed by that. There were very few higher buy-ins during that series, and it seemed, actually I'm not aware that was a conscious decision, but it did seem like timing wise that, along with the messaging about responsible gaming and COVID-19 was a good fit. And yet that's where I play. I play PA Scoop. I play PokerStars PA. I live in Pennsylvania, so I'm super lucky among Americans who are locked down to be in one of the 2 states where PokerStars is legal, and one of 4 states where there is regulated online poker. So it's PA, New Jersey, Delaware, and Nevada.
Yeah, nice to have the option. I'd say there's a lot of people going stir crazy right now. The last thing I want to ask you about was, Dara, since we were last on the lockdown, and in fact since we last had a show, you did a podcast interview for a chap called, I want to say, Demantas
Nishka, yeah, Lithuanian name. I would have guessed he was Lithuanian, but I did ask him at the start. And yeah, young Lithuanian lad. He moved here when he was 8, so sounds completely Irish now, but doesn't have an Irish name, obviously.
That got a really good response. I will admit I haven't checked it out yet. I normally do check out all of your interviews pretty regularly, but it's been a fairly stressful week or so. We're in the middle of our UOS, our Unibet Online series right now. It's every single day, so there's no break day, so I don't have much free time, but I will check it out eventually. But I have heard a lot of people comment on how good the interview was. Can you maybe give us a few cliffs?
It was a very long interview. He ended up having to spread it over 2 episodes because I did just bang on for 2.5 hours. I think the reason why people who stuck with the whole course through is that I didn't just talk about all the stuff that I normally talk about on poker podcasts. First of all, the audience was very much non-poker players who are interested in poker. So that sort of forced me to talk about it differently and try and get across what it is like to be a professional poker player to people who maybe just know the hand rankings and not too much more. But then Demantas was also interested in talking about all the other areas of my life. So we got on to obviously the running. We got on to sort of my early involvement in the development of the internet and all the other tech projects that I had done before, because his actual background is in tech. So that was a particular interest to him. So I think I ended up talking about a lot of stuff that I had never actually talked about before, at least on a poker podcast, or since I got involved in poker. I definitely got a lot of messages from people saying, "Oh wow, yeah, I heard a lot of stuff that I hadn't heard there before." Louise Butler told me she actually got to the whole 2.5 hours in one sitting during her Sunday grind. So shout out to Louise for sticking with that. She said it was one of her favorite interviews. So yeah, I mean, the reaction's been very good. I think it is a sort of a bugbear of mine, I guess, that too many poker is almost too much of an incestuous world, and we don't reach out of it enough. All the poker podcasts tend to be aimed at existing poker players, and that's true of ours as well. And that's obviously necessary because they're the people who will listen to your podcast. But I think poker in general, the poker industry, has to sort of make a more concerted effort to sort of reach outside the tribe and talk to other people and get other people engaged and explain to them what our world is and why it might be of interest to them.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds fascinating. So who is this podcaster? What kind of background do they have?
He's a young guy studying computer science in Ireland. He's Irish. He moved here when he was 8. And his thing is his podcast is called Chasing Passion. So he tries to find people in totally different areas of life who are passionate about what they do and just talk about what makes them passionate about it. But yeah, very good interviewer and very nice guy, very enthusiastic guy. So I found him very, very pleasant to talk to.
Well, I think you guys are both very good interviewers. So notwithstanding, of course, this hour, but in general, like when you say he's a good interviewer, like what stood out to you? Like what is like one of the skills of a good interviewer?
I think one of the skills is not inserting yourself too much into the thing, just sort of guiding the conversation. What he was very good at was, I would bang on for a while and he would pick out something which he found particularly interesting and asked me to expand on that. So he was sort of guiding the conversation that way. And also just being an enthusiastic listener as well. If you're talking to someone who seems genuinely interested in what you're saying, I think that tends to make you perform better as a speaker than if, somebody who's clearly bored and, or maybe not bored, but just going through the motions. With someone like Demantis, you do get the feeling that he's listening to everything you're saying, and he's deciding what to respond to, how to guide the conversation, rather than just having a stock interview that he does.
Yeah, one of the struggles I have as an interviewer and podcaster is I love interviewing, but when I'm podcasting, especially at the beginning of it, I'm sometimes really distracted by the technical aspects and making sure the levels and everything is great. And obviously, my husband helps me when it starts, but then I always get a little paranoid that things are a little off. And sometimes they are off. And that's difficult. But that's one great thing about the structure of the grid, that in the beginning, it's so regimented that they tell this hand, and usually it takes like 3 minutes to tell it. So I can kind of like try to like get through my paranoia at that point. But still, I found that to be one of the more difficult things, that I'm worried about something technical and I stop listening to the guests during that time. And it's tough. It's a really tough balance to strike. It's nice that there's two of you. So you probably don't experience the severity of that.
We can take turns listening to the guest.
Yeah. Most of the time, I just block out the guest and I'm staring at the next question I have to ask, waiting for them to pause.
Well, look, we don't have another audio episode of the Chip Race for about 2 more weeks. So if you are jonesing for a fix of the dulcet tones of Dara O'Kearney, do check out that interview by Demantis. In the meantime as well, I was on your show, Jen, and I don't know when that interview is going out, but people have to, I guess, look forward to it, maybe dread it. I don't know. Have you heard it back? How bad is it?
Oh, I thought you were, I really liked it because I really like getting to know the writer side of you. As I could tell by listening to the Chip Race before I knew you as well, that you had that somebody on the team had, an editing background, because you were so precise with your cuts. And so getting to know that you also had this background in writing and film, we were able to kind of explore that as you actually took a hand from a script that you wrote. So not a hand that you played, because unfortunately...
I'm not going to spoiler your brilliant line, but you introduced it so well. I won't say it because I don't want to prejudice anybody who listens, but I get seriously burned right out of the gate. Let's put it that way.
Okay, I'll save it. We'll save it. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I like that. We had Dan DeVoris on, and I heard your episode with Dan on the Chip Race recently. He's so great.
Yeah, he said how our interview was much better than yours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that on Twitter. He gave me a C+. I don't believe him. He loves the grade. But Dan, I don't know, where was I going with that? I don't even remember. Oh, Dan in the grid talked about a hand from a dream. And then you took a hand from a script. So that kind of created...
Falling apart, Jen. Your concept's falling apart. People
are just making hands up.
You're not even a quarter of the way through and people are just fucking, I found these 2 cards on the ground. Does this count?
Yeah. Dan DeVoris was pretty convincing though on the episode. People like that one.
Yeah, I enjoy that one. DeVoris is one of my favorite people to listen to. He's just incredible. Our interview was quite tricky actually, because David, if you remember, I had literally just done my 32-mile run. So I was somewhat fatigued, let's say. But Dan is so engaging. Yeah, he just snapped me right out of it.
And he was dying to talk to you about all the running stuff as well, because he's a bit of a fitness freak himself.
Yeah, really nice guy. Really nice guy.
Yeah, God bless him. He gave us one of our best shows ever. That's, I think, maybe our 2nd or 3rd best show of all time.
2nd most listened to, yeah.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Wait, quite surprising. It's interesting to us, like, sometimes it's people like that who really resonate. I think it also helped that we had Cavalito on the show as well.
That was a great interview. I thought
our
he was
first
wonderful.
Brazilian, yeah.
I didn't know about him, but when listening to the interview, I just loved. He just kind of brought me into another like world of poker that I don't know that well, because I've never been to Brazil, and I think he did a really good job of kind of bringing your guests there, and probably brought a lot of Brazilian listeners.
Yeah, so I think that definitely helped as well. I mean, it is something we're conscious about. There is, there's an unfortunate trend in not just podcasts but poker media in general, where there's sort of a very much focus on the Anglo world, the English speaking world, and we kind of forget that there's these vast places which take poker seriously as well. So we've made a conscious effort. We had Amity, Adrian Mateos on recently as well. We're hoping to line up some French players. But yeah, you want to get away from just sort of the sole focus of English speaking. Obviously, it can be difficult because some of them maybe don't have great English as well. But one of the things that gives me the most pleasure when I'm looking around at the iTunes charts, because I'm a real nerd for charts, is just how many different countries the Chip Race pops up in, and how many of those countries we are literally the only poker podcast that registers.
There's no need to be mean. God, she's right there. Okay.
Hey, speaking of which, I just downloaded Spotify, and because you know how I listen to my podcast now. I wish I listened to more because I don't work out nearly enough. But my new thing is I put on a workout video on my big monitor, and then I mute it and I listen to a podcast. So that works out really well because these workouts are a bit boring, so I get to be entertained. But I was looking at the Chip Race on Spotify, and somehow it just didn't come. Like, what's going on, guys?
There's a story there.
All the other markets, we don't need Spotify.
David has consistently resisted my pleas to put us on Spotify for reasons best known to himself.
But yeah, Dan DeBoris, I think
it's just too much work.
Dan is so smart about the game, so brilliant. And I think that a lot of times podcasts, it sounds obvious, but podcasts where people have a sense, maybe from previous work that Dan has done, that they might actually not only be entertained, but actually get a little bit better at poker by listening to it. That's going to improve the numbers just because, people are self-improvement addicts, especially in the poker world. So if they can kind of double dip and pass an hour very pleasantly, and B, get better at poker or figure out how to get better at it, then that's going to just really mash up well. And I've noticed that with the grid as well, especially since it has that explicit strategy angle, that sometimes non-famous guests that have very prestigious, online or live careers, those ones tend to be very popular.
Yeah. That was the eye opener for us. We kind of figured that out early in the Chip Race. We always refer to the Pads moment when we had Pads on first, and we looked at sort of the other guests that we had and the number of Twitter followers he had compared to them, and we thought, the numbers on this show might not be great because he doesn't have the same sort of Twitter reach as other people. But actually, it was our biggest show ever at that point, and that sort of really drove home the point that that's what our audience wants to hear. Guys they know are very good players talking about poker, and guys they know will talk intelligently on the subject.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah.
Whereas for our audience, we've had sort of some of the, in inverted commas, characters of poker, the live poker players who've been around for years. And I mean, it's great to have those people, and we do sort of want the diversity, but in terms of numbers, they just don't tend to perform as well as the online players because they just don't resonate as well with our audience.
And that's okay. I mean, I think it's fine to not just be obsessed with the numbers and bring in people who are great interviews but aren't as popular. But it is eye-opening, and it makes a lot of sense, especially for the grid, which has that very explicit strategy, self-improvement angle. Even though some of the podcasts are more storytelling, but there's enough of them that are very strategic that you can see why people would do that. Now, I do admire you guys have done a great job of diversifying, particularly on the gender point of view, that you seem to have women every show, sometimes 2 women a show. And even though considering my relationships in poker, I know so many women and I have so many female friends in poker, I have to say that it is a little bit more difficult to book them for the grade. And it's not because they're not interested in appearing, but I think that maybe they feel they're more likely, I think, to be shy that the episode's going to be listened to and they're going to be mocked for their lack of strategic understanding.
They're scared of you, Jen. They're quite simply scared of you. They find you a very intimidating interviewer, and they're worried that you're going to make them look silly.
And exactly. I think it was very nice of Jen to say that you can't worry too much about numbers, because she's obviously bracing herself for the lowest numbers ever when your episode goes out.
Well, on that note,
Well, you are sandwiched between moneymaker and livery, so.
Yeah, thanks for that. Cheers for that. I'm in that sandwich. But anyway, I do want to say sincerely, and I know I speak for Dara on this one, we are huge fans of your show and we were delighted to see you win the award. So fair play on that. It would be absolutely okay by us if you went back to back now next year. So please go do that. Also, I want to say thanks a million for, as Dara pointed out, the minute your camera went on, looking really nice and being beautifully lit to create an unbelievably obvious contrast with us. At least Neil Farrell, who came on the last show, had the decency to basically be in pitch darkness.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm literally just off my run, so I'm sitting here sweating profusely. You've had to turn your fan off because it was too noisy. So we both literally look like sweaty perverts.
Well, it is bright and early here in the States. You know, I just had my coffee.
Well, on the phrase "sweaty perverts," Jen Shahade, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, thanks, guys. This was fun.
Perfect. We could have there.
One more look at that. One more look.
Oh, no, don't do this to me. Oh, stop.